Durham Planning Board. And next step is to do a determination of a quorum, and I see 4 members. We have Mr. Wilson, Ms. Kaplinger, Mr. Purinton, and Mr. Talbot. So we have a quorum. And anyone have amendments to the agenda that they would like to make? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 3, acceptance of the minutes of the November 2nd, 2022 meeting.
I would move to accept them as presented.
Okay, any comments? Hearing and seeing none, I need a second, please.
I second it.
Hearing and seeing none, all in favor of accepting the minutes or approving the minutes, raise a hand. Approved 4-0. The next step is informational exchange on the non-agenda items. Mr. Thamarj.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, last night, the Conservation Commission held a public informational meeting, and I know you 3 of the board members were there. And it was to review the draft amendments to the zoning map to recalibrate the town's resource protection to reflect the data in the 2018 comprehensive plan. About 30 people showed up and had a very good discussion, informational exchange, and so that was part of the process that we had discussed back in June of this year in terms of the Conservation Commission taking on that land use policy question in preparation for the town meeting. So that was done. Also, I got an update from the consultant who's doing the town's GIS tax maps. So digital tax maps for the first time will be prepared very soon. And that information will be put on the town website so that people can access the assessment data and that sort of things like most towns have. So that's
Next couple
it's
of
being
months?
oh no, next couple of weeks. It's
Oh,
being,
excellent.
Oh, that'd
being
be great.
finalized. So that's pretty much my report.
Okay, let the record show Mr. Hutchinson, so we now have, for the first time in a while, 5 members. So town officials, any residents in the audience who would like to speak about things that are not on our agenda this evening? Seeing none, any non-residents in the audience who would like to speak on things that are not on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 5A, continuing business, the completeness review of the final plan application for the Deer Creek Crossing subdivision map 7, lot 32A. And just as a note, public comment will not be taken. And so then this step is to decide whether everything that is required to be submitted has been submitted, and before we move on to a substantive review of the final plan application. So would you like to lead the discussion?
Sure.
Please?
I'll kind of frame the question before you tonight, which is the determination of completeness of the Deer Creek Crossing subdivision. And the application was found to be incomplete at the November 2nd meeting. And the issues that were identified were the DEP approval of the new stream crossing and removal of the existing one, the Army Corps of Engineers approval of the new stream crossing, the MDOT road entrance permit, and the assessor map and lot number that has been added. So that last one is addressed. The applicant submitted copies of their DEP and Army Corps permit applications. They also submitted a DEP stormwater permit based on the comments provided by the peer reviewer. The Army Corps of Engineers, they submitted an email from Heather Stukas indicating that permits are required for certain aspects of the construction, and they're still waiting, as of, I think today, the DOT permit. And per section 6.8C of the land use ordinance, they have to obtain those outside approval agency from outside agencies prior to the submission of the final plan. And the planning board does have authority to grant waivers of those and any other submissions, provided that the applicant requests such a waiver, and no request has been submitted. And I did prepare draft complete and incomplete letters, so you can, whatever direction you decide to go in tonight, we're prepared to act.
Did you say that an application has been?
No.
Okay.
We've not received an application requesting a waiver of the procedural the submission requirements for the submission of those permits with the final plan application.
So summary, we're still missing 3 permits and no application to waive that.
Just see where the applicant stands on those issues.
Okay.
I don't have them in the packets, and I have not received them.
Okay. we'll start with that.
Yeah, those three are still pending. Our DOT engineer went on paternity leave until December 19th. So that has been put on the back burner for however long. I think that culvert washing out was very unfortunate timing because then they sent it off to their engineer because now they're concerned about every culvert in Durham. I think my hope for the evening is that these three items, they don't affect our plan per se. It's just more of a timeline thing. I don't think the NERPA permit's a pretty generic permit. It's essentially a construction permit. We did add the stormwater element to it. Worst case scenario I see is having to move an underdrain soil filter up the bank 20 feet. But I think our argument's pretty strong against that, seeing as that where I place, so the way I see this whole project is the site, the road, the stream crossing. Y'all saw the property before we got to it. It was in disrepair, it was neglected, there was a road already in. In my designing process, I attempted to minimize all the disturbances, and that's generally my approach. You'll see Bowie Hill and other projects that the idea is to minimize your impact. And so what we did is we located our road on the existing road. I put my pond right where the existing crossing comes across there, so there's that big where we all walked across, and there's that big gravel area there. That's where I put my pond to minimize additional disturbances. Yes, that is within 75 feet of the pond, the stream. I've permitted dozens of underdrain soil filters within streams and wetland setbacks, and the irony is you want your ponds to collect as much water as possible. Where that would be is the lowest point, which will be closest to the stream. So inherently, your ponds do end up encroaching as close as you can to the streams. So all in all, I feel like what we've provided is a very solid project. I think none of the abutters should have much room to complain, seeing as we've got substantial buffers all the way around there. The access road in, we're improving that situation. All the abutters essentially were complaining that their backyards were flooded currently. We've now graded a ditch that should drain their entire backyards. All in all, I'm just looking at this project saying it's such an easy win-win for everybody. And I understand, there were other projects in the Durham pipeline that, there was some site distance things and some red flags that were raised, thus ensuing some peer reviewing. I've gone back and forth with the peer reviewer a couple times now. I think, again, what we provided is a very good project. I've used every DEP sizing standard that I've ever used in my career for the last 10, 12 years. And I think the Army Corps permit, again, it's any time you touch a wetland, you're going to the Army Corps, which is a newer development. She kind of waffled on it a little bit, but then she's like, yeah, I guess if you're going to touch some wetlands, send us. And it's a generic permit. It's nothing that has huge red flags to it and that they're overly concerned about. So my hope is that we can agree that this is a good project. It's well designed. The intention is met for the entire area, and the once these approvals roll through, that we could almost just condition a final approval that says once you have your DEP, your DOT, your Army Corps permits, it's done. I don't know what else. To come back in and talk about to say, yep, here are the permits. It seems just like another hurdle to jump over, and there's been a lot of them. So that's my spiel on the project as a whole, and I'm just really hoping to be done with it.
And, okay, so you don't have the three permits. Where's the request to waive that?
Well, I don't think you can waive them, really. I can't waive an Army Corps permit. I can't waive it. Those are required by law that I have.
No, I'm not asking my question, correct me if I'm wrong, is you're not requesting the requirement or requesting a waiver for the requirement to submit them. You're just asking us to do that. There is a formal request process.
No, can I ask a question?
Sure.
John, I would suggest we not to go through a waiver process on that. What I suggest maybe we do would be to do a conditional approval that these three items are going to be submitted. And if those three items get submitted satisfactorily, then it would get its approval.
Hold on. So first, I want to understand, do we know where it says in here that we we need these before we can proceed? Like, what is the language in there?
It would be section 6.8, page 40 of the ordinance. 6.8C reads as follows. Outside agency approval and comments. Prior to submittal of the final plan application, the following approvals shall be obtained in writing where applicable. Maine DEP, under Site Location Development Act, that's not applicable. Maine DEP, under NRPA or Stormwater, that is the case. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, if a permit under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act, that's also present here. And then MDOT for a Highway Access Management permit, that is also here. And then they're also required to submit review comments from Inland Fisheries and Wildlife and Maine Historic Preservation Commission. They have put those in. It goes on to say, if the board is unsure whether a permit or license from a state or federal agency is necessary, and you may recall back at the preliminary plan stage, we had that discussion, and the applicant indicated he did not believe that those permits were necessary, and that's why they went forward with the process as they did. They may be required to obtain a written opinion from the appropriate agency as to the applicability of their regulations, and they could have done that back in September.
Right. So
So
we've got,
that's,
okay, we've got
yeah.
the thank you, George, we've got the language as to what is required to complete the application. Now, what can we waive?
Okay, so, that is a requirement for the final plan submissions, is my interpretation.
Yeah, so is that the
And
next?
so then you can go to section 6.35, I think it is, waivers. And waivers of certain submission requirements where the board makes written findings of fact that there are special circumstances of a particular tract proposed to be subdivided, or that the application is simple. You can waive portions of the submission requirements unless prohibited by statute or other law. And so I think if you wanted to, you could go in two directions. You could go, as Ron has said, to give a conditional approval saying, hold the Mylar, or they don't call it anymore that, the recording plan until those permits are submitted. You could do that, or you could say to the applicant, look, the ordinance is pretty clear. These approvals are supposed to be submitted with the final plan. They were not. If you don't want to submit them, then you should have applied for a waiver. So you could go in either direction, I think, and have a sustainable decision.
So, sorry, George, stay
Yeah.
on the waiver 6.35, is it
Yeah.
A, the waivers of
Yeah,
certain
it would be
submission
it would be a submission requirement.
Well,
Those
we're-
permits are submissions.
We're not asking for
They're
waivers.
not asking for it. We're
No, I
asking-
know,
yeah, okay.
I'm just trying to like see where we are here. We're kind of going off on a tangent outside of a waiver. And in general, this isn't just like a north arrow on a plan. These are permits that are from state agencies that do have jurisdiction on this site. Our peer reviewer mentioned it. It's not just,
The other factor is that during the preliminary plan review process, and it went into the preliminary approval conditions, is that the board, public concerns were expressed about the environmental impacts, the Conservation Commission weighed in, and the board relied upon the issuance and review of those state permitting environmental agencies
Right.
as the basis on which you granted the preliminary approval. So that's just a factor to consider.
right. So I am not in favor of allowing this to go forward until we hear back from these agencies. And also
wouldn't
just,
be.
just
Oh,
in
sure,
general. Well,
That's rude.
Well, can I just finish what
Charlie,
I'm talking?
that's
please?
enough.
I just wanna
That was
finish.
just rude.
You don't get to,
Sorry.
she's talking, you've had your chance.
Like, there could be something that changes per these agency responses. Maybe not, maybe you guys do just get these permits, you're good to go. But if something does change and we go forward with review, we have to go back anyways. So,
And it would have to come back for an amended plan if
Right,
that
and
was a
so-
result.
and this isn't just a site high up upland with no wetlands. This is a very wet site, resource protection is nearby. There's issues with the culvert not being identified correctly on the site plan right now, so that's just my thoughts.
But I agree with what Ron was saying. I mean, if we granted conditional use based on satisfactory acceptance of those reviews at a
But does that mean we
whatever
go
date.
forward?
if it was satisfactory, so I think what it would be is that, you know, we wouldn't have to look at this again. You know,
Right.
everything else except for those three things is, let's just assume we're happy with everything else except for those three. And if we did a conditional approval, then they'd have to get those things in, and then once they did, then they could move forward.
Right.
Or the other option, I think, is to say it's not complete, come back and we'll look at it all on a, at another
And that's the
meeting.
first step, so we need to decide whether in fact it's complete or not.
Yes.
Whether,
Yes.
the next thing about whether we'll give them a conditional use is the part B on this.
And these are the only three things that are holding the completeness up, right? The
Completeness,
DEP,
that's
COE,
correct.
and DOT, those
Yeah.
three permits.
Mhm.
Tyler, did you have any comments?
I don't right now. I think I'm leaning towards agreeing with Ron and Alan that I would be comfortable with saying, and if saying that we have a condition where the permits are granted, and obviously if there's a significant change, then amendments would have to be made. But still dwelling on it.
On that, how would that be written up? It's a condition of what? Like, we're just doing a completeness review. What would this be?
Well,
a
if you
condition
determine
of?
that the application is substantially complete, it's kind of like, remember they requested a waiver of the survey monuments on the corners of the
Yes.
tract?
Yes.
And you agreed to let them do that at the time that the other pins are set. So you'd kind of do it the same way. You'd say, look, those will be submitted before the final approval becomes effective, so that would be a condition of approval.
But
For the final approval that you grant.
But-
They would say, the recording plan shall not be released until the three permits are submitted.
So what we're saying there then is that we might not hear anything back from the agencies until after the final site plan has been
Until you,
submitted. until
that's
we
right.
review
If you
it.
go in that direction, that would be the case.
There's no way. Are you guys really
So
saying that?
what's that, we're in completeness
You're
review
still
again?
determining whether you're gonna give a substantive
And
review to
then
this application.
If we did do that, then the next step would be for them to come back for final.
No, you could then proceed tonight with and your packet contains their application for final approval. And depending, you've had a peer review done that identified a number of issues with the project design. The applicant has responded to those. The peer reviewer has submitted a shortened list, but the peer reviewer still sees that there are outstanding issues on the design of the project, which have not been resolved. So, if the board feels that the applicant, and again, the peer reviewer, as I said in my agenda notes, is not, you're not subject to their opinions. Typically, what you have is you have your own independent engineer reviewing this, the applicant's engineer, on the issues that they differ on. The applicant can make their case and try to convince you, but the burden of proof is always on the applicant to say why the town's peer review engineer, who is also a qualified engineer with lots of experience, why they are wrong. And if they can convince you of that, then you can accept the applicant's position on whatever the issue is. So we could begin the substantive review tonight and make progress on that review. Or you can say it's not complete, and then when it is complete, hopefully by that time, the peer reviewer and they would be able to come to a point where they're in agreement that the plan meets all the requirements, and then it would be a pretty quick process of just going down through the draft findings. You can go either way.
My concern is with the completeness, is that when we did the preliminary plan approval, we granted that based upon them getting the necessary permits. We elected not to do a peer review of a couple of things because we're gonna get a core, we're gonna get a DEP thing.
Exactly.
And we don't have that. I mean, that was a major part, at least in my opinion, of approving the preliminary plan at the time.
Yeah.
And two things. One, we don't have the permits, and I guess my question would be, do we need a formal waiver request?
No, I think that you could go either say, yes, you do need a waiver to do this, or you could make the position that as long as you do it as a condition of approval. I think either route is
Okay.
Well, no, if we did a waiver, you suggesting they waive that they even need to submit them, or you're suggesting
That way.
you waive, we just don't need to do it at this
Go
stage?
that way. No way am I granting
I'm not, no, at the end of the day, they have to do it, before, in my opinion, before they start construction. We have to see a permit before,
Right, and that's,
So, hold on, you go. and then-
I'm surprised that we're even talking about a waiver. The applicant is not asking for a waiver.
Yeah.
We've asked for these reports, and we're waiting for those reports to come through. I would not be in favor whatsoever of a waiver.
So, but what we just talked about with George is that there is a chance that we could get through final plan review and approval and not see these permits. If that is the case, we'll spend all of this time potentially getting something down the road that makes all of our time here moot, and we have to go back.
But it would
Why
be,
would we,
but it would be totally dependent on the results of those outstanding reports.
the permits?
Right.
Yes,
Yes,
exactly.
yes,
That's what I'm saying.
yes.
So why would we go ahead before we get word from these
can I
agencies?
say something on that? Yeah, because we're pretty much on our end, we're confident it's gonna come through, it's just a timing thing. We're not asking for a waiver, you're not gonna do it. We're just asking for a condition of approval, just, we can move forward, it's gonna come in as we think, and if it doesn't, it changes the project, we come back to amend it.
When do you think it's coming in?
I was hoping this week on the DOT thing. I've called them. I mean, that to me is a big one.
But also, sorry, yes, DOT, but these NERPA,
I understand.
I think we have
I was
to
gonna
edit
get to
those.
those.
We have to resubmit.
I did this morning.
Okay.
So,
But if anything changes with the permit coming back that changes the project, we come back to amend the
I
project.
know, but what I'm saying is our time here, like,
Well, that's what we're trying to do, is save the time, because if it comes back as we think it's gonna come back,
we
it
don't have to
won't
come for another
change
meeting.
anything on the project, then you don't have to see us again, is the whole thought.
potentially,
That's
but
the
you
hope.
could
But if
double
it's-
our
Right.
time.
it wouldn't be double.
I don't think it's really doubling.
It'd be the
If we have
same
to come
meeting.
back next time, or there's a 50-50 shot, or whatever it is, that we gotta come back again, there's still a chance we don't, so we could be
There's-
saving the
yeah.
time.
There's a chance.
That's all we're trying to do. We're not trying to not do anything we have to. It's just, you know, everything's submitted. We think it's gonna come back.
How much, what could be initiated with these three, what could be initiated by the applicant? These three reports being outstanding, what could they what could you do? What are you
Nothing.
anticipating you could do?
Nothing.
Just lining stuff up. We're
Lining.
trying to get
Basically, once it
schedule-wise
comes in,
and
then we can
complete
go.
Surveyor maybe.
Trying
go
to
out and
save
set
the time.
things,
Okay.
You know, survey.
finances, all that kind of
Okay.
stuff.
To me, that's one of the big items. Is now that if we've agreed on the layout, we know this like the things that could possibly change at this point are maybe the culvert size changes, right? Like
Which we would have to
whatever.
come
Like
back.
I change a note on the page and that's changed, right?
Well, it could be bigger than that.
But then we have to come back to amend it.
What would be bigger than that?
Right.
You could be changing your stormwater calculations.
Then we gotta come back.
No, changing the size of the culvert doesn't change my stormwater calculations. That crossing is what it is. We've oversized it. It's that stream's not wider than 2 feet. I put a 60-inch culvert over top of it, which is well above and beyond 1.5 times.
You're not going to.
Why can you interrupt me and I can
I'm
interrupt
sorry,
you?
you're right, sorry.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So
hey, the next time you do say something like that to one of my members, one of those other gentlemen will be presenting for you.
that's fine.
Do not do that
That's
with
fine.
my board members.
That's fine. So then, the other things that could possibly change, is like I said earlier, the underdrain soil filter could move up the hill a little bit, but I don't see that being a problem because I do believe that the reasoning I explained earlier, the gravel area is that's where we put our pond. That's the disturbed area. That to me is as logical as you can approach a project, and I'm assuming and hoping that the reviewing agencies will see it that way as well.
But if
And
any
that-
of that changed,
But even so, like
We would have
that's
to
what I'm
come
saying.
back.
And if we get through all the substantive review, and those are the two items that could move up or down ever so slightly, to me that doesn't change our conversation. I mean, you guys aren't reviewing the stormwater anyways, right? That's something that I now have the DOT, Army Corps, DEP, and a peer reviewer all reviewing, right? That's gonna be reviewed 4 times over before it comes back. And if any of them change anything, then we'll have one other meeting, right? If I have to amend that and make a change to that, I come back to that next final meeting and say, okay, here's the little changes we made. If we can get through substantive review, and those 4 permits come back and they all are fine, then there is no second meeting. So to not do substantive review tonight guarantees an extra meeting. If we can make it through substantive review and say, yeah, this project is a good project. There's no big red flags here. There's no dangers to the environment. Everything that's been done out there, the wetlands are a product of what men have done to that area, right? Like we put a bad culvert in there, we ditched across a wetland that dammed up the other side of it. So we've impacted that area as people already. My my proposals saying, look, we're gonna follow the existing damage done, turn this into a decent looking residential neighborhood, and
Okay, I think we've heard that. I think the question before the board is, do we want to continue with, completion, excuse me, use the right term there. So, I guess we don't have to have a vote.
Just remind us of the three pieces that aren't in right now?
Corps of Engineer permit, the Department of Transportation permit, and the Environmental Protection permit.
Stormwater, DEP.
Yeah.
yeah, they're all regarding the same element.
So the DOT permit deals with the alignment of the neighborhood.
Can I speak to that one?
You may.
The DOT is actually fine with the alignment, as the peer engineer also said, they're fine with the alignment.
Okay,
The DOT now is concerned because that culvert washed out on Route 9. They want to review my stormwater.
okay.
So that has to go off to their
So I
engineer,
think that,
which is an ordeal, right? Like, that's just,
Which,
that helps me out a little bit, because that if they came back and weren't okay with that
Well,
alignment.
and I would say that
be a
all
big-
we have is somebody's telephone call. I mean,
the peer reviewer weighed in on the alignment as well.
okay.
The peer reviewer said he doesn't have a concern with the alignment.
And we asked for the DOT, okay.
And the DOT is that, again, the DOT, the guy on the phone was like, no problem. And then he was looking carefully, he's like, literally that week is when the culvert washed out. He's like, actually, we have to look at stormwater along Route 9. I gotta send this off to the engineer.
I just don't wanna set a precedent of taking phone calls.
Sure. No, that's peer reviewer said the alignment is not a concern because it's offset so minorly,
Okay.
no big deal.
Well, we can go through the checklist on substantial review, and at some point in time, we'll run into those issues and I guess take a vote on, at that point. So we need to do the checklist for substantial review.
All right.
George, if you
so,
want
wait, are we,
I'm sorry.
so are we going through?
not substantial review, completeness, I
Okay.
will say, I'm sorry,
So we're,
completeness.
no, few, okay.
Yeah,
so
we're still
we
doing
are-
completeness.
okay. And can I just say one more thing? I wanna
put
just
that
make
up on
it
the
clear
screen.
that it's not that we're trying to make sure that the project is okay. Our ordinance says we need these permits to make it complete. It's
Totally.
not someone says, oh, it looks good, our Gore Palmer says it looks good. That's not what our ordinance says. It says we must have these permits.
Totally.
And for good reason.
That's what we're gonna say. Even if we do it conditionally,
I
we're
mean,
still
for
saying we need
completeness.
it.
I'm saying for completeness review,
Yeah.
whether or not all of us
But that's
agree
what a
on that.
conditional approval is you're saying it's complete, conditional on getting these things.
Correct.
Yeah. It's,
Yeah, I hear you. Okay. So right now we're going through.
I think we're ready to start the completeness review, and George, do you have?
Well, again, you've already done the completeness review and you identified those three issues
So
as
I
the
don't know if
only
there's
outstanding
anything
ones.
else.
So it really is take a vote on whether to accept the application as being complete.
Thank you. So that would be, I will need a motion on whether, yes or no, the motion on whether or not the application is complete, given the three missing permits.
I make a motion to find it complete, conditional on receiving those three permits.
And can we get into detail about when? Like, when are we saying we need those by? Like, what part of the process?
You can actually deal with that when you do your final approval condition, assuming you get to the point of making a decision on final approval.
Okay.
So you're basically saying the application is substantially complete, notwithstanding the absence of those three permits.
Correct. So
That's
that
the
would,
vote.
that would be the motion.
Yeah.
The changes. So we have a motion. Do we have a second? So we have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? If not, those who are in favor of saying it is substantially complete, raise a hand. 2, those who are not in favor of saying it is substantially complete. So that did not pass.
Okay, so then you should probably make a motion to determine the application is incomplete.
Can I have a motion to determine?
I'll make a motion that the application has been deemed incomplete based on the missing three permits.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? If not, those in favor of determining it to be incomplete, raise your hand. 3-2.
Well, if if I may say, I don't understand in doing something like that, why we even use the term of conditional. We're voiding that entirely. I just don't understand why we would go that way and not, the applicant knows what is outstanding.
I mean, the way that ordinance is written, you shouldn't even have accepted my final. That shouldn't even, the fact that you've accepted it, we've already blown past that ordinance. The fact that I'm here is, we've blown past that
No,
ordinance.
you've had 2 completeness reviews, that's part, I can't,
But it says you shouldn't even accept a final approval.
I can't accept or not accept, that's the board's authority. So I submit it, they do a completeness review, I do a preliminary review and give them agenda notes, and they make the determination.
Yeah, that's not
whether it's
that's not
complete or
up for discussion. I mean, it's been voted as incomplete,
Yeah.
so when you have the permits, we'll reconsider. So, we're not ready to move on.
see you guys again. Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Okay, moving back to the agenda. The next thing is new business, completeness review of final plan application for amendment to the Brown Road subdivision, map 1, lot 9A. Mr. Applicant, please, and I forgot to do it last time, please announce your name and address for us, please, both of you who are gonna speak.
Sure. My name's Kevin Clark from Sightlines. I'm an agent for the applicant, James and Grace Cullum, and this is Mr. Cullum here beside me.
Hello, I'm Jim Cullen.
Okay. He's going to put something up on the board for us.
We're gonna try.
You're good, no, I'm not,
Yeah, we want you to run the audio video.
that's,
Yeah, well,
You didn't know that?
speak up for me.
That's
Okay,
his audio right there.
if the town planner would go ahead and introduce the project to us.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this application is requesting amendment of a recorded subdivision, known as the Brown subdivision. And the applicant has requested that the application be considered for a waiver of the procedural requirements to allow, given the nature of the project, the combination of the preliminary plan approval with the final plan approval process. And as I indicated in my agenda notes, many towns have a mechanism they call minor subdivision. If it's less than 3 lots, or 3 or fewer, they have an expedited the procedure like what we're talking about. Durham, when we put this together, looked at the state model subdivision regulations where they said that, look, you could have a 3-lot subdivision that raises issues, especially if they're gonna build a road or something. So rather than doing that, they recommended that you look at these on a case-by-case basis, and if it is as simple as it seems, then you would grant a procedural waiver. So that's the mechanism that's being available, and that's what the applicant is requesting. So they have submitted the final plan application for this approval of 1 lot, and with the expectation that if the board grants a waiver, then you can move right to the substantive review. I have included in your packet a complete draft letter of completeness and incompleteness. So if you decide to move forward with the review tonight, we can later issue that completeness review. So, as I explained, I've had, and prior code officers have had discussions with the property owner, and pretty much it was unclear to them that any subdivision approval was even required for this, because generally under Maine law, splitting a lot into 2 does not require a subdivision approval. But checking the records, we found that there was, in fact, in 1996, a subdivision plan for the division of 2 lots that created this lot. So that recorded plan, this land is part of a approved subdivision, And under the ordinance and main law, you can't make a change to that without getting a subsequent planning board approval. So there were two ideas for how this came to be approved as a subdivision. The first one I pointed out is that old Grant Road discontinued could have been interpreted to create 3 lots, that little 1 acre on the corner, and then the other 2. Or, another thought is that at the time that division was proposed, that was part of a lot that had been split within the prior 5 years.
That's what I think happened,
That's
George.
probably
Looking
it.
at it,
Yeah,
the lot next door,
yeah.
was separated from this, and then 1 or 2 years after this, they did a subdivision
Yeah.
of that lot as well.
Yeah,
So
so-
I think it was split, and
Yeah.
this lot was split, and then the next one did, so I think that's
So-
Can
what.
you show up there?
Yeah,
Do you
because
mind?
they're all not number 9. They're all,
Yeah,
Yeah, they're,
Round Round subdivision is more than just 2 lots
well,
at this point, correct?
no, this is the Brown subdivision plan, and this is just,
Second,
it's just 2 lots. There was the first lot here,
Mhm.
which was 9A1 and 9A2. A different plan shows them Ks, I'm not sure, K1 and K2. So there's a connector here, so this 1 acre on the opposite side of the old Grant Road is part of that lot 9A1. And then the 6.4 acres highlighted in red is 9A2, which is now the property of the Cullums. And that's the parcel that they're looking to divide
yeah,
the
that's,
lot out.
that 9A1 there is equivalent to 9A on our tax
On the
maps.
tax map.
And then the other one, to the right, 9A1, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, 9A2, I'm sorry, is 9A on the tax maps. And 9A1 is 9J.
And then there are some more,
All the other 9
3 more lots going
Bs,
this way
Ds,
that
and
came out of the next parcel.
there's about 10 lots, so all the other 9s are not part of the subdivision, not part of the,
Not part
I
of
guess.
this request. But I
Thank you.
think this division here was the reason they had to go for approval for the 2 lots, is when they divided this whole piece from that whole piece.
I see.
As best I can tell, it was 1996, and it's just unclear, there were really no notes on the plan to explain
Based on
why they
everything-
had to do a subdivision.
Based on everything I'm seeing is Cumberland County, the Brown Road is the divider between Cumberland County and Androscoggin County, correct?
Well,
Yes.
as best we can tell, in this area, it's actually the north side of the side of the road. The Brown Road is actually in Pownell.
In Powell.
Oh,
But the reason I'm asking that is in 1996, that was filed, that subdivision was filed under the Cumberland County Registrar of Deeds, which kind of surprised me because it's actually in Androscoggin County.
No, I think the plan is recorded
this-
in.
there may have been
Based
another
on the
one.
paperwork that I read, it said it was filed in Cumberland County. My concern about something like that, if somebody's doing the research, thinking that this is actually in Androscoggin County, they're not gonna find that 1996 filed with Androscoggin Register of Deeds.
Yeah, it is. This one is Androscoggin, book 39, page 31.
Well, maybe there's a,
Is
Yeah.
there a typo somewhere?
I know I remember seeing it.
And I could very well have said,
Filed in Auburn.
no, it said, my letter says Androscoggin.
Yeah, where I got my deed from was Auburn.
Yeah.
If
But I
find
could have
it,
said
I'll-
Cumberland somewhere else by
Yeah.
accident.
Okay.
Okay, so the general request here is just to split this lot
Correct.
in the red, right?
Yeah, that's the existing
request
lot,
here.
and we want to split that. Can you change that plan?
Yep, I will.
Should have circled it when I saw it.
6.11, Alan.
And so here's the 6.4
This can-
acres,
I'm
Yeah.
gonna put it up
And
there
we're looking to
full
split.
screen.
2.07,
Mhm.
and then remaining 4.33 that Mr. and Mrs. Cullum are gonna maintain and then convey.
And again, the only reason you guys are here going through this is because back in the day, for some reason, there was some sort of subdivision or something.
It was a subdivision, it was signed by the planning board. And then your ordinance says that anything that was approved and signed by the planning board has to come back for a reapproval. Other towns are allowing, if 5 years have passed, they're not requiring that. Topsom actually wrote that into their code recently.
Okay.
So if it's been more than 5 years and you can get 2 lots that meet the standards, then you can divide it without going for an amendment.
So
And the
if-
oh, I'm sorry.
So the question before us is, I don't want to use the wrong terms here, but is this a minor enough, simple enough process to go straight to final plan versus preliminary plan? And, you know, so that's their waiver is to jump over preliminary plan, sidewalk, and just go straight to final
Do
plan.
final tonight.
That, yes, and start working on the final, if it's substantially complete, but, yeah, so that's, I think our first vote is on a waiver,
Correct.
so I'm still stuck up on.
And the
waivers.
waiver form on page, starting on page 40 of the packet.
Prior to that, the one thing that I had talked about was the Cumberland County Registrar. It's actually under 6.11. It's on the 3rd page.
Yeah,
And I don't know whether
I
that,
apologize, that is my typo. That should say Androscoggin.
okay. It just kinda, I just wanted to.
I found a
get that.
couple other typos when I read it this afternoon. And I did,
We really read these. I do too.
I did spell and grammar check and I got 100%, but there's still things in it the second time around.
Okay, so back to the waiver request, if you're okay?
Yes,
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's on page 40, and this is the request for the waiver of sketch plan preliminary and go right to final plan. The justification for that is provided in item D of the application, and we've already discussed that. And then if you decide to go forward and vote on the waiver, you would use page 42 in the packet, 3 of the waiver request form. And you would basically,
Bless you.
it would be item B, which is waiver of procedural requirements. And then there is there's facts there in terms of what is the basis of it, and then you would move, and then vote on that.
so we have the authority to grant a waiver for procedural requirements per the 4 things that are on page something other, 63 of the ordinance. Correct, we can do that.
Yes,
And
yes.
so the 4 things that have to be met for the waiver, no new streets are proposed, this is off of Brown Road. No approval, and an engineer in his submission covered those, so no approvals required from Maine DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, under the Site Location of Development Act, Stormwater Law, or Natural Resources Protection Act, other than permit by rule. The board agrees to approve a waiver from the requirements to submit a stormwater management plan and sedimentation and erosion control plan, and the application contains all the other applicable submissions required for both the preliminary and final steps, except for those items for which a waiver of a required submission has been requested and granted by the planning board. And you have waivers when we get into the
We have
substantive review.
2 other waivers, yes.
Okay. So the question, well, there's, I guess, a tweak to that Mr. Thabars and I were talking about prior to the meeting, is that the verbiage requires a stormwater management plan, which may or may not make sense depending upon the board's decision for this particular project. So we would have to add that waiver to one of the other waivers that you've requested.
And we did, that is one of the other waivers that were
The
used.
story, okay, I didn't read that, okay, good, point that out to us. So that is a question, if those 4 criteria are met, then we can approve the waiver. Is there any other discussion about that? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the waiver to proceed to the final plan, the completeness review of the final plan?
I will,
Motion to waive that we move to the completeness.
Thank you. Second?
I will second that motion.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing, seeing none, please raise a hand if you approve. 5-0. Okay, so we can then move to the completeness review.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the applicant has submitted, and in their application and their cover letter, they've gone through all of the submission requirements, and they've noted that on many of these, again, we're dealing with a one lot, and many of these things deal with much larger projects. And so you will see in their completed checklist on page, starting on page 46 of the packet, and the first 3 pages of the checklist are the final plan submission requirements, and they've indicated which ones they have submitted and which ones that they are indicating, like letter of commitment from a bank for the infrastructure costs. They're indicating that those would not be applicable, so.
Okay. Should we go through quickly if everybody's had a chance to read the completeness checklist submission by the applicant? Are there any questions? Want to go through them individually? If not,
What, is the lot getting like conveyed to a child, or it's getting sold?
I'm sorry, excuse me?
The lot, you're selling it, correct?
Yes, to my abutter, yes,
It's getting sold to the abutter?
yes,
Okay.
the 2-acre lot is getting sold?
yes.
I had one question on that is, Mr. You checked a block about, on B19 of the checklist, any flood areas and flood boundaries is shown on plans. You said yes, I didn't see anything on the plans.
Well, that is sort of a paraphrase of the section in the ordinance, and we did provide a flood map.
A flood
But
map.
it shows that it's in the area, it's in zone X.
So you're talking about
minimum flood.
Zone X, which is not a
Yeah.
flood hazard. I got you. Okay, that confused me. All right, do we have,
I think I questioned whether I should say yes or no there myself.
you explained it well. Do we have a motion, or any other comments, discussion on completeness? If not, a motion to accept this as complete.
Actually, I'm sorry, I do have
Yep.
one question.
Go
You
ahead.
can just call me the wetlands girl, I guess. It does say that all the wetlands were mapped.
No, we-
There's none on the site,
we
right?
didn't find any
Okay,
applicable.
that's what I was assuming. Thank you. And you're not anywhere near RP or anything like that, so.
Nope. There's a tiny little, is it a fire pond? But it's off from, it's down, or I should say, it's towards the northwest of the property, but it's on the next lot.
Okay.
I don't know if it's I don't know if there's a
That's good.
standpipe there or
Yeah, we're
not,
good.
but there's a small
It's not on the
pond.
property.
Oh, yeah, I
We're good.
see it. Yep,
Kevin told,
little thing.
yeah,
Any other comments or questions on completeness? Seeing none, do I have a motion to accept this as complete?
I will make a motion to accept this application as complete.
Second. Motion by Mr. Hutchinson, second by Mr. Purinton. All those in favor of accepting it as complete, raise a hand. 5-0. Okay, now we go into substantive review. And out of that, Lars, would you like to lead off the discussion?
Yeah, let me go back to my notes on that. So basically, as we said, this is what many towns consider to be a minor subdivision, and we go this route of treating it as the same process as a final subdivision. So the main issues for a project like this are making sure that the proposed lot, excuse me, has the minimum zoning requirements of 90,000 square feet, and the minimum road frontage requirements for both lots, which those are met. So it meets the basic zoning standards, excuse me. The other thing would be a concern is if there were site constraints on the lot, such as wetlands we've discussed, as well as steep topography, and it's generally our slope topography with no severe steepness of slopes that would cause erosion problems or challenges. And then making sure that the lot has a test pit for a septic system that will pass the Maine State Plumbing Code, which they have submitted. The groundwater restrictive layer is 18 inches from the surface, which is well within the state plumbing code requirements. There is a requirement in the ordinance that we've been focusing on more recently with the on-site water source for fire protection. It sounds like there's a pond right within a short distance of this property, and the applicant is requesting a waiver of the requirement for an on-site cistern with 30,000 gallons worth of water, which is what you would require in a multiple lot subdivision per the ordinance. And they have indicated their willingness to accept a requirement that the house that's built on that lot be protected with a residential sprinkler system. And the fire chief is fine with that. The other waiver that they're asking is for the well exclusion zone under the Maine Plumbing Code, as well as the well drilling standards. You can't have a well within 100 feet of a septic system. So most subdivisions in Maine now require, most planning boards require that they put a well exclusion zone so that you don't have somebody drill a well on one lot, and that's then in violation of the setback requirement on the abutting lot. And it's particularly important when you get into cluster subdivisions. If you look at the subdivision down the road here, you'll see the well exclusion zones pretty much cover almost all of those lots. And the wells have to be located in the corners outside of those radii. So when you got a 2-acre lot with, this density, then that's not as much of an issue. So they're asking that they not be required to put a well exclusion zone on that map. And they still have to meet the state plumbing code separation of 100 feet. And then as John picked up, the ordinance technically says you have to have a waiver on the stormwater. They have submitted an erosion and sedimentation control plan, which is very appropriate for this, for the lot in terms of the construction of the new home on it in the future. We're not sure what the plans are for eventual construction. And then basically the stormwater. You wouldn't typically require a stormwater management plan for this anyway, because they're not going to have detention basins and DEP filter beds and those sorts of things anyway. So they, which application form did you use for that waiver request?
I've not seen it on the storm management. It may just not be in my packet, but I have not seen it.
No, I'm not.
You've got one for the fire water system and one for the soil test pit and the well exclusion.
I think of may have said,
But in any case, you can easily add that on page 78, where they are requesting waiver of the performance standards for the sprinklers, or on the one for the well exclusion zone, you could include a waiver of that stormwater management requirement, plan requirement, so.
yeah, I'm trying to see where I put the justification for that one. And maybe I just described it as not applicable, and I should have said,
You did, but that did say that, but it doesn't ask for a waiver.
okay, I apologize for that one, that was. Is that something we can add on to
I think you
one
can.
of those?
Assuming it's approved, yes.
So I think those are the main issues, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on that.
And so on the well exclusion zone, that requirement is, the intention of that is like you said, for smaller or close, lots of, that are close. You wanna make sure people don't put a well in such an area that makes it.
Or that they create a lot where they can't put a well because it's within, all of those, well exclusion zones.
Yeah.
So you wanna make sure every lot has a place they can put their septic system and a place where they can put their well. Those well exclusion zone does a couple of things. During your review, it verifies that that's not gonna be a problem. And then number two, when they go out and start building the subdivision, that's on the subdivision plan, everybody's gonna be aware of those well exclusion zones.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's that multi-purpose thing.
yep.
So to be clear, I mean, maybe to get on the record, you're gonna do no improvements to these lots. So you're not adding storm drains,
Yeah.
ponds, Or any of that other, because there's questions and you've got not applicable, I just wanna
No, there's no construction proposed on that,
Okay.
that lot. He's simply going to sell it, and
Okay, so no
the
estimate.
buyer may build a home on it, but I think that's all that would be allowed in that zone anyways, correct?
They have to apply for a permit at that time.
Yeah.
Friendly to, Can I ask a question? It's on,
Are there any other questions?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Applicant has a question.
about the, fire protection in the home, the sprinkler system, is that required for mobiles and module homes too?
You agree, if your question is, do you have to put one in your home as grandfathered, I would believe.
Well, I think
We're
he,
talking about the people that may
Oh.
want to put.
he'll say they wanna put on a mobile home or
I'm talking
double.
with Calvin over here, and he mentioned that it might be, not, yeah, you don't have to do it, I don't know the big.
Calvin would be the wrong guy. You
I
need
know
to,
that,
yeah.
yes.
Calvin's very smart, I don't want that to come out the wrong way, but the fire chief, whoever is gonna build in there,
That's what he told me
Yeah.
to talk with.
it's,
So I didn't know if they're exempted from modules.
do you have any other questions before I interrupt you again?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm-
Any board members have any questions or concerns about any of the performance standards? Okay, but before we do this, we need to approve 3 waivers.
Right.
Correct.
Yep.
So individually, or maybe we combine one of those, so,
We've approved
But-
one waiver so far. No?
which was a procedural waiver. Yeah, I'm sorry, that was, to proceed to the final plan step. So then we have, in your packets, there should be, paperwork for 2 waivers, 2 waiver requests. And one of those will need to add verbiage to cover the stormwater management, a waiver on the stormwater management.
So you would
plan.
go to page 78 of the packet. And the waiver of the stormwater would be under 6.35A. And the waiver of the, is this the well exclusion one first?
Yes.
Um,
Oh, no.
Nope.
Well, 76 is fire.
This is for the, that's right, for the on-site water.
Should we go to the other one and put it on?
Either one is fine. And that would be under the performance standards C.
So we have to go through some questions. I guess if we're on waivers, then the first waiver, as it exists now, is the fire facilities. And this would commit you to whoever buys that lot and builds something to putting a residential sprinkler system on there. And so we need to approve it on the waiver, if that's what we do. A waiver of performance standards, and that's on page 79, George, with those
That's right.
4 criteria there, which I'll let you read if you got in front of you. But basically, he's provided a factual basis for granting it. Does it nullify the intent, substantially met the performance standards, and are they noted, I guess, I'm not sure I noticed that, are they noted on the recorded subdivision plan, so you'd have to record them on the plan? Put them
Sure,
on the
and
recorded plan.
Yeah. And I'm sure when George writes up the findings, then I'll take the conditions and the waivers and add those to the plan before we
Okay.
record it.
The only ones you need to put on the plan are standards, not procedures, just so you know. Yep. So a note would be needed to add to the subdivision plan if you grant the waiver of the well exclusion zone and the on-site water.
So if we're comfortable that he's provided us the factual basis, are we? I guess that would be a question. Any problems with that for granting the waiver? They don't have the effect of nullifying the intent and purpose of the zoning regulations or subdivision? Any problems with that? Any concerns about that, rather?
They're all kind of related. It seems like the intent of this section of the zoning ordinance applies to a subdivision, you know, like what we just were reviewing previously, where there's, you know, gonna be multiple new houses and the town wants to ensure that there's adequate water supply to, fight fires for
Exactly,
a
that's
number
right.
of new
But
houses.
unfortunately, it is a subdivision, so we
Yeah.
just kinda have to waive those particular requirements.
Yeah,
So if there's no concerns about any of those four, items, then do I have a motion, to approve a waiver?
I will make a motion to approve a waiver to waive the requirements of 6.16C and I forgot the other number that for the stormwater.
6.35B3.
6.35B3.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? George, you got everything?
Yep.
If not, raise your hand if you approve the waiver. Passes 5-0. And we still have one more waiver to review.
That starts on page 80 of the packet, which is the waiver for the well exclusion zone. And that would be under, again, 6.35C waiver of performance standards.
Are there any, the applicant have any comments? If not, I think we understand it.
No, I don't need to.
Okay, we'll just, does the board have any questions or concerns?
I feel like as said here, it's a lot of land, whereas it seems excessive to require these assessments to provide the well exclusion zone, so I don't have an issue.
yeah, and lots to either side of this are already developed, so it's, that's gonna be their limiting factor on where they can put a well or septic. They're not gonna be able to locate a well in such an area that it's gonna make someone else not be able to put in a septic system.
And when they, correct me if I'm wrong, George, when they come in with a site plan to build on either parcel, the code enforcement person would take a look at the location of the well versus house and other things?
Not necessarily, because they don't give permits for that. They give permits for the septic systems. And they would be looking to make sure that the septic system is not within 100 feet of a well, but
So the
not
site
necessarily.
plan doesn't include, the house site plan doesn't include the well
Usually not.
location of the parcel?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I have to throw, dust in the thing there. Are we ready to make a motion on this one? The same four criteria apply? As whether the waiver is acceptable?
Yes.
Okay. Would you
We're
make-
ready.
Yes, we are. Would you make one, please?
Yes, I will make a motion to accept this waiver. Is it 6.35C? Is that right? Or 6?
Yes.
Okay.
And the actual standard that's being waived is 6.9.B.6.
Performance standard, right?
Yep.
Is it, or is it 6.9.B.6, is that what you said?
That's what
I'm sorry.
That's
So
the
we-
requirement for well exclusion
Okay,
zones.
we have a, and a second, we have a motion, thank you for moving it along.
Pause there.
All those in favor, raise your hand. It looks like 5-0. And so the waivers are approved. And then I guess the next step is to approve the final plan.
Yeah, so
Did I miss that vote?
I have provided for you a set of findings of fact that go down through all of the criteria for review. In there, I have noted the submissions that the applicant has submitted, as well as basically I copied and pasted from their submittal, the justification for their meeting each of the standards. And so those are contained on the draft findings, which are pages 92 through 97 of your packet.
And we need to vote on each of those
It would
separately.
be good to just make a motion and a vote on each one of them. You don't necessarily need to go down through all the discussion, assuming that you've all read the packet and understand the justification.
Okay, my So number one, the title has been cut off on my copy.
I don't know if I got those, George. That's okay, though. I'll look
No,
online.
you should have it. You should have it. Like, do you have page 92 of the packet? If not, it's probably on your computer screen if you printed it
I don't know
out.
where you're seeing the 92
Yeah.
either.
Well, it's, if you're looking at the PDF on the screen, it's 92 of 98.
So it's right after this whole thing.
Finding of, yeah, keep going.
It
Could be-
says subdivision approval
could be
decision
one of the
findings of
last
fact.
pages.
Yeah, these are all like
Yeah, it's not
FEMA
there.
and,
Well, it's not here.
no, I don't have it. That's okay, I'll look over your.
Okay,
folder.
I can bring it up on the screen if you like.
Yeah,
That'd
actually,
be
that.
good.
Yeah,
that
that's
would
a
be
good idea.
Thank you.
Give me a moment. Let's see, Brown. Complete. And let's see, do we have the? Let me just see if it's in there. No, okay. Let's do it this way. Did anyone else, you have seen those, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're on
I think with mine, is it,
I just wanted to make sure I did.
Yeah,
the
they're
number
on
there?
there.
You did, I know.
yeah, it was in the packet online.
Yeah.
it's missing number one and what the title is on mine is all.
Almost there.
It's only 98 pages.
There you go.
It was like,
And if I try to speed through it, I lose the
Okay.
whole freaking document.
There's,
I know.
okay.
Okay, so number one is pollution, and I won't read through it. Does anybody have a concern, well, we can if there's a concern about pollution?
Sorry.
That's what
No
happens.
concern at all from me.
No.
Anyone else? If not, I'll take a motion on number one to approve or disapprove.
Motion to approve the pollution on the review criteria. Pollution section.
Second.
Second that.
Motion by Tyler and second by Ron. All those in favor, raise a hand. 5-0. Next one is sufficient water. Any concerns about sufficient water?
And you will note that the findings do include the granting of the waiver and the condition for the residential sprinkler system.
Do we need to put that in as part of number one?
That's that too, number 2.
Yeah, number two.
Well, it's in there, so
Okay.
it's already in there.
Okay, so number one, sufficient water, and with the residential sprinkler option requirement, not an option, requirement.
Can I say something? This isn't
Okay.
about your project at all, but just number 2, the wording here. Maybe we could get this on our town warrant, not this year, but next year, the following. Has sufficient water available for the reasonably foreseeable needs of the subdivision. Like, how do we know? You know, like, we can't, we should be saying more like, has, appears to have, or something, you
So
know?
many gallons per minute.
Yeah,
Well, that's in the state statute.
really?
Yeah,
Like, how are
verbiage,
we,
yeah.
like, if we've talked about this, how are we supposed to, again, this is not about your project,
No,
but
I-
how
I
are we
understand.
supposed to figure that?
Well, if there were, where comes in is that if you have an area where the wells are dry, because, you know, it's an area that has very deep groundwater aquifer or
Yeah.
bedrock aquifers, and that's not sufficient.
Right.
And then secondly, if they were proposing a very high-density subdivision or commercial, where they're gonna be doing groundwater withdrawals, it's gonna be affecting other groundwater, that would be, doesn't have sufficient. That's for supply, and then also for, water, fire safety, water protection.
Mhm.
That's the other issue. So if it meets those, there's no well problems in the areas, and they're addressing the fire protection, then it has sufficient
Yeah,
water.
okay.
And if we had a concern, not to beat this horse too bad, but if we had a concern about whether down the road, 100 years from now, then they could require a hydrologic survey or something, they being the board, we could,
Well, I wouldn't look 100 years, I'd look at when this subdivision gets built, is there gonna be enough water for it?
Yeah, but I guess I'm trying to figure out if there's a quantitative standard to apply.
Yeah, hydrological studies can be showing that, there's not enough water recharge in this area those wells are gonna go dry.
That's a future, that has
And
nothing to
that's
do
one
with
thing
you.
we included was, there's a map from the state
Yeah.
that shows,
Yeah, I saw
it
that.
doesn't have all of them,
What is
which it
that?
should,
Is that gallons per minute?
and that's
Is
gallons
it
per
gallons per
minute.
minute?
And so those were, in the area were
Okay,
all pretty well.
That's
I mean,
more
I
of a
think like
future
the lowest
question.
was,
Yep.
lowest was maybe 3 or something like that, and that's,
But
That's
that
more than
language is,
enough for-
Want
that,
to hear something crazy? I am, I think, 2 miles just north on 136, and I have half a gallon a minute.
I had 3.5.
Everyone around me is huge.
he's got
It's-
3.5 at his house.
Yeah, and even
Yeah.
that's somewhat, like, most
Yeah.
people are 6 or up.
Yeah.
But yeah, our well is 1,100 feet deep,
wow.
just to
Oh,
be
yeah.
able to have enough
Get to know
yield.
your neighbor.
How much?
1,100.
Well,
It's a
Yeah.
quarter
We
of
do,
a mile
we
down.
do have a motion in a second,
But
so.
sorry, so you're far away, I just like, it's real,
I'm yours
it's
to
real.
join in that
Just-
conversation, but we do have a,
You must have a long rope and a
So-
big bucket.
okay,
Big bucket,
a vote.
sorry.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving it, raise your hand. 5-0. Moving on to number 3, erosion.
And they have submitted an erosion control plan as part of the
I've
record.
done that. If everybody is satisfied, or if there are questions on number 3? Seeing no questions, concerns, do I have a motion?
Motioned.
Tyler, second?
I'll second that motion.
Tyler and Juliet, I have motion and a second. All, any other
Made
comments?
some motion out of you.
Please raise your hands. It passes 5-0. Next one is traffic.
It's just gonna be adding one driveway on Brown Road.
I motion that we accept the, traffic
Okay, second.
as written.
Second.
Discussion, seeing none, in favor, raise your hand, please. Number 5, sewage disposal.
And they have submitted a soil test meeting the main plumbing code requirements.
So the motion would include the waiver that we approved. Is this the one where we get-
No, this is just that they have, adequate sewage waste disposal.
Okay,
They can put a septic system on their property.
okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay, a motion,
Move that we accept number 5.
second.
Seconded.
Motion by Mr. Purinton, second by Mr. Wilson. All in favor, raise your hand. Number 6, municipal solid waste disposal.
And they have, well within the capacity of the town's system.
And they're right on the public, the driveway is on the public road,
And
right?
just so you know, this got put in there back when they were doing landfill closures. And some towns had their DEP determine that their landfill was not in compliance, and they wouldn't allow any development in the town until they get their landfill situation
Yeah, yeah.
resolved. So, but it's still in the law, so
We don't wanna
it
talk
doesn't,
about our old landfill.
doesn't really matter.
Well, it's been a,
About that.
Sorry, strike that
Research
from the
is okay,
record,
right?
please.
Strike that from-
well, it's been an issue on other subdivisions, cause they won't go down a private road, which obviously doesn't apply here, so.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to accept number 6?
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Wilson, second by Ms. Kaplinger. Raise your hand if in favor. 5-0. We're moving on to aesthetic, cultural, and natural values.
And they will maintain a 50-foot vegetative buffer along the roadway, and I reviewed all of the state inventories, and there weren't any sensitive resources.
I move we accept item 7.
I have a motion to accept, second, okay. We have a motion from Ms. Purinton, second from Mr. Hutchinson, and all in favor, 5-0. Conformity with local ordinances and plans.
As I indicated in my opening comments, they have the minimum lot size and road frontage, meet the zoning requirements.
Okay. Motion? I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that we approve number 8, conformity with local ordinances and plans.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Towler, second by Mr. Purinton. All in favor, raise your hands. Number 9, financial and technical capacity.
That is demonstrated by their having professional preparation of the plans. There's really no infrastructure or other financial requirements for the project.
Okay. A motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Gavin, second by Mr. Wilson. All in favor, raise your hands. Number 10, surface waters.
And it's not located with any watershed of runaround pond or any area subject to mandatory shoreline zoning.
No wetlands.
Move to
No
accept
wetlands.
item 10.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Mr. Purinton and Mr. Hutchinson. All in favor, please raise your hands. 5-0, groundwater.
Then I think.
Again, they've
If you
submitted.
guys keep doing that, I just keep saying motion and second by the same guys. and we-
I was just thinking.
Can I start using my left hand?
Yes.
Groundwater, number 11, please.
Yeah, they have indicated passing soil tests, and there are no documented problems of wells in the area.
Any discussion? If not, a motion to approve.
So
I-
moved, number 11.
I will second it. So number 11, a motion by Mr. Purinton, seconded by Mr. Talbot. And I'll raise your hands if in favor. Number 12, flood areas.
And as the applicant has indicated in their flood maps, this is not a flood-prone area.
Any discussion?
Move to accept item 12.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Purinton, a second by Ms. Kaplinger. If in favor, raise your hands, please. 5-0, freshwater wetlands.
And the applicant has testified that there are no freshwater wetlands within the proposed lot.
Move to
Motion.
accept 13.
And I will second.
Motion by Mr. Purinton, I could say just the same two people, but by Mr. Purinton and a second by Ms. Kaplinger. All in favor, please raise your hands. 5, I guess 5 should at least look. 5-0, river, stream, or brook.
Oh, we skipped farmland. Did
Oh,
we?
I'm sorry, farmland.
Yeah, the applicant has indicated there are no active farmlands nor farmland soils on the site.
Move to accept item 14.
I'll second.
Mr. Purinton, motion. Ms. Kaplinger, second. All in favor, please raise your hand. 5-0. Now, river, stream, or brook.
And again, the applicant has testified that there are no regulated streams within the property.
Move to accept 15.
Second that.
Motion by Mr. Purinton, second by Ms. Kaplinger. All in favor, please raise a hand. 5-0. What are we on, stormwater?
Yeah, and I had drafted this with under the presumption that this was exempt from stormwater management requirements, which I still think it is, but we did grant a waiver on the requirement for a submission of a stormwater plan, which we can add.
If I may make a motion, then, the project has received a waiver from stormwater management requirements. We'll just change it is from exempt to has received a waiver.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll make, oh,
I've made a second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Talbot, a second by Ms. Kaplinger. No, Mr. Purinton, and all in favor, please raise your hands. Spaghetti lots prohibited.
There are no spaghetti or manicotti lots in this subdivision.
good one.
George, zinger.
Zinger.
Where was your
Bazinga!
After that touch of humor, a motion, please.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Kaplinger, second by Mr. Wilson. All in favor of that motion, please raise your hand. 5-0, Great Pond phosphorus concentration.
The only great pond in Durham is Runaround Pond, and it's not within that watershed.
A motion for a motion for the, as written,
So moved.
second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Purinton, second by Ms. Kaplinger, that the project is not located within, if in favor, raise your hands. 5-0. Number 19, impact on adjoining municipalities.
And again, the addition of one house on Brown Road shouldn't have an unreasonable traffic congestion in Durham or any other municipality.
Move to accept.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Purinton, second by Mr. Hutchinson. All those in favor, raise a hand. 5-0. And last but not least, land subject to liquidation harvesting.
There has been no timber harvesting on the property within the last 5 years.
Move to accept.
I'll second.
A motion by Mr. Purinton, second by Ms. Kaplinger. All in favor, raise your hands. 5-0. So now we have to do what here? To approve the final, we have one more motion to make?
Yes, and the conditions of approval are listed on the bottom of page 6, and they're on the screen. And we would add that requirement that the waivers of performance standards be added to the subdivision plan.
All three, okay, all three are, okay. All right, so a motion that would include the, what do you call those things at the bottom?
Conditions of approval.
Conditions of approval, as written, plus the one performance waivers that we approved.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Puritan, seconded by Ms. Kaplinger. All those in favor, please raise your hands. 5-0, and congratulations.
Thank you very
And
much.
and thank you for doing a good job on the
Yeah,
application, by the way.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to compliment the applicant on
Yeah.
the thoroughness.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what-
Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, Merry
Sorry,
Christmas.
still have to go through the full process.
Thank you for your service.
It was thorough.
It was very well done.
Yes.
Thank you, George, for all your help.
However.
Okay, we are on to the affordable housing. George talked about Conservation Commission, and that may still, if it goes before the town meeting, it has to come to us, so Conservation Commission, or our resource protection is still at work. Good night.
Take care.
Have a good night.
It's still a work in process, but our, the work we've been doing on affordable housing is up for discussion, and I think at some point, just kind of why it's there is at some point in time, we have to come up with, you know, help the recommendation come up, you know, for the selectmen, or what we'd like to do, or not, just send it to them with comments. And then we've done our information hearing, we've had the survey, we've talked to them at the local election, so I think we've done a good job of getting their signs up, getting going. So I think we've done a good job of getting the word out on this. And so, what we need to do, and I think by the January meeting, January 3rd meeting, we'd want to be able to put together a recommendation on what the warrant should be, you know, George would write it, but what we'd like to recommend of the options, or tweak the option, or whatever it may be. Because I kind of lost it last night. The selectman said that hey, we cannot hold a public hearing more than 30 days before, which puts the public hearing in the
Early March.
first week of March.
But there's nothing that says you can't hold more than one public hearing. So
Nothing that says we
theoretically,
have to hold one.
yes, but
Thank you.
part of the idea would be if you wanted to take public input and make changes, then that would give you more time to do that.
Well, our survey has already taken the public input.
Yep.
I think we've, yes, I mean, I feel comfortable that we, and
Yep.
depending on what others, I feel like we've had, we've done a good job of getting the public input to it. And it's not final. I mean, the survey's still out there. We can just kind of say, hey, you know, if you got any last minute comments, get them out. But I'm not sure what we accomplished with yet another meeting, but I'm one guy.
Weren't we just shy of 200 respondents on that?
So far, yeah.
195. To me, the data looks kind of just like a mess, in most regards. So I think a lot of it's going to come down to how we want to word it and present it, which means I think the more time the better with getting more public input, since the data essentially says very little. Then we have to kind of go with our best guess as to what majority of people say, and put that before people, again, to make sure people would be on board. Like, okay, well, this is the best we could do with what we were doing.
Would you see that as, I'd pick an option 4, draft up, say this is what, option 4 is this, that, and the other thing, and then you're recommending, and there wouldn't have to be a public hearing, it'd be just another informational meeting.
Right.
I mean, like we did in October, or it could be either one, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure that we need to do that, but I
But
don't know.
if we went, wasn't it option 3?
Option
Yep.
3 was
Higher favorability. If we went with that, wouldn't we have to increase the lot size?
Yes.
Yes, we'd also have to change, there'd be more ordinance changes required.
And that's the big thing. I don't know whether the public actually knows that for sure. Who knows? Do they, if we had a public hearing, I would be posing the question to the public at that hearing, do you really realize that it would actually have to increase the lot size? And is that really what they wanted? Was that the
Yeah, we'd have to,
application?
because that would be part of an ordinance change, is it say
Oh,
now
well,
it's,
exactly.
now it's a 100-acre lot or a
Yeah.
3-acre lot or whatever,
Mhm.
whatever we'd want to do.
That was stated in the survey. Now, whether they read the fine print or
No.
not, that's an issue.
Yeah, I
And
think
the
a lot
other
of,
thing, the other thing to consider is that it would only be required for the additional units.
Right.
So
Right.
it wouldn't necessarily, you wouldn't need to change the basic lot size. It'd just be if you did multiple units, you could add that they have to have more
I,
land for multiple
okay,
units.
now I am a little confused, because I thought the law said that you could not make changes if ours is 2 acres for a single-family home.
Mhm.
We could not increase it because they want to do additional units.
No, actually, the law does allow that.
Does allow you to increase.
It allows you to increase. Doesn't require it, but it does allow it. As long as it's not more than the standard lot size. So for example, you couldn't require, allow a single family on 2 acres and then require, the second and third units to have 2 acres each to make it 6 acres. You could only add, you couldn't, you could have the lot size per unit the same as for the standard single family. So if you could require 2 acres for each additional unit for a total of 6 for 3, under the law. They
Okay, I mean,
specifically allow that.
totally misunderstood that. I thought you had to put, if it's, ours is 2 acres for a single-family lot. If you
Yep.
wanted to have additional units, you couldn't change that.
The law requires you to allow additional units, but the law specifically allows towns to increase the lot sizes for those units as long as it's not more than the single-family requirement
So,
So if you had,
per unit.
like if you went along that route,
Yep.
and someone had a 6-acre lot, they could get 3 units on it. But if someone only had like a 3-acre lot, then
Well, if they have 2 acres under the, if you don't address this by increasing density or lot size requirements, so under the new law that goes into effect next July, if you don't increase lot sizes, they will be able to put 3 units on any lot where you allow a single family. If there's a single family there, they will have to allow 2 more units on that 2 acres.
because I took your drawing, it may have just been me, I took your drawings to say, with a picture of a house on it.
Yep.
And they said, okay, you can put an addition on that house, but that same size lot,
With option 2, you can.
With
Option
option two.
3 is then you say, well, the state's making us do that, therefore, we're gonna increase lot sizes to offset that.
Okay.
That was option 3.
so the
so
wrong,
that's increase, we'd increase lot sizes townwide.
For extra units.
Okay.
You wouldn't necessarily need to increase it for 1 unit.
Right.
But
So
you
if-
could say, okay, the state's making us put 3 units on this 2-acre lot, we're gonna say you have to have 2 acres per unit.
so you'd
You
have
could
to have
add
6
that.
acres.
You could add that.
So you'd have to have a 6-acre lot.
Yeah, so they've already
to
got 2
put-
acres for the existing single family.
Yeah. Or if you had like a 4-acre lot, you'd be able to put it on 2 units.
Yeah.
Or one additional unit.
I certainly don't think the townspeople want to be able to add additional, and you have a house lot with 2 acres and have the option of putting 2 more houses on the same 2 acres without increasing the lot size. I just, it's like having a subdivision and keep on reducing and reducing the lot
Well, we already allow,
per house.
an accessory
You already
apartment.
allow duplexes, 2 units on 1 lot, 2 acre, that's actually 2.5 acres.
2.5 acres.
And you allow accessory units on any 2-acre
Which is
lot.
2 units.
But it can only be 50% of the main house.
So what's our responsibility here regarding, decision with the select board? Are we supposed to be working in tandem with them on this?
Well, I think we kind of make a we've done the information meeting, we've gotten feedback. We then digest that feedback and say, okay, the planning board recommend, and we don't have to make a recommendation at all. We could just say, we had this meeting, here's the video of it, here's the survey results, here's the public hearing results. Do as you know.
And have the select board
Let me
make that.
let me back up one. The final public hearing has to be the verbiage of the article. Yeah, I'm sorry, I misspoke. So the final public hearing has to be the verbiage of the article, which I think there would be a little bit of room to tweak it, but not a lot of room to tweak it.
But we can make the recommendation to the select board,
Correct.
or we can almost just give them and let them.
Let them,
Okay.
yeah, and just like a recommendation is a recommendation, they may or may not, you know.
I was just
want-
curious.
Oh, we-
We can, but I don't think we should.
Yeah.
I don't think we should not make a recommendation.
Are we allowed to make, limits on the size of additional units on the same lot?
Yeah,
Cause like, so say someone has a normal size, let's say, single-family home, and like, we already allow an accessory apartment that's
Correct.
50%. Could we say that, okay, you can now have 2 accessory apartments that are, or a accessory apartment that's 50% and a tiny home that's 30%?
that's what option A or option 1 was intended to do, to say, look, allow, because the comprehensive plan supports allowing more units.
Yeah,
Okay, but to try to control, to make them fit in, you could say that those can, for a single family, can now have 2 accessory units, but they have to be accessory. They can't be full-sized units.
yeah.
That's what option A, and a duplex could add an accessory unit where they can't now, but it would have to be accessory, half the size of one of the units. So that was the intent of A, is to provide more housing options, but try to keep it within the character of the town, and not increase lot sizes, because then that defeats the purpose of making more housing availability.
Yeah, that's what I would like to, because I mean, I think my gut feeling is that any fear of this is that, you know, all of a sudden people can now have 3 single-family homes on a 2-acre lot, you know, that are 2,000 square foot each.
If, assuming they fit, I mean, you still have to meet all the setbacks and all
Yeah.
that other.
But I mean, but if we could go with something like option A, I think that kind of addresses the intent of the law and, you know, put some limits, makes it, you know, like, you know, my lot's 6 acres, but, you know, half of it's wetlands. But, you know, I could have a accessory apartment above the garage and then maybe a tiny home on there, and it's not kind of overbuilding that lot. But I couldn't put 3 single-family homes on that lot.
And doesn't the state law say that you can limit it to no more than 50% of the existing?
Again, that's all up in the air, because there's no clear definitions.
I thought it was.
And
in that.
DECD was trying to come up with some rules, but they haven't really come up with them yet.
So George, in your opinion,
Mm-hmm.
which option best supports a comprehensive plan?
Option A.
So based on everything that we, all the public hearings, whenever we have one, it seems to be reinforcing the comprehensive plan. If we're writing ordinances, they should be reinforcing that. And that's what I would be supporting.
The term is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Correct. And if we did go with option A, what changes to ordinances have to be made?
Now, do you want to talk about the survey results? Because I think that might influence, or at least should be considered, because it's one thing for the planning board, select board, or anybody else to propose something. It's another
Right.
thing to have it pass at town meeting.
Exactly.
And so part of the survey indication is to say, look, you know, and Tyler, I thank you for doing that detailed analysis of the correlations, but basically, if there is strong sentiment in the town that, you know, they should not, the town should not follow the comprehensive plan on this issue, unlike other issues, and those people show up at the town meeting and they're the ones that vote, then but then in this case, the fallback position is then the state you do what the state says you have to do, whether you write it in or not.
Yeah,
So
I-
you could just go on that basis and say, look, practically speaking, this is what the comprehensive plan says, but we've tested the political waters, and we think that you might as well just put up this minimum state requirement, and that's probably what's gonna pass, because the state's gonna enforce it anyway. So, ideally, you would follow the comprehensive plan, but politically, it just may not fly.
And I kind of when I look at the data, and yes, Tyler, thank you very much for doing that. You really have two, in my mind, you've got the, make it as restrictive as possible group, which is 51% or some number like that. Then you've got the other half, which is, yeah, we want to do this, some of which is just do the state plan, which does, doesn't increase lot sizes or whatever, and then other ones that, yes, do as much as you can is the wrong term. So it's 50-50 between people who want to expand the options
Yeah.
without making it harder versus 50 who think we should make it harder. And
So the other thought, in kind of following the pattern that was taken from last night's meeting, you could put option A up for the first vote, which is to say, follow the comprehensive plan. If that fails, then add the language in that will put you in compliance with the state as a fallback option.
Sorry to be really stickler and annoying, but option A is option 1. We haven't,
Yes,
like,
sorry,
okay.
sorry.
I don't know. I just want to make sure I didn't
Option
miss a
one.
note. Yeah.
so that's, I guess, the next meeting we have, we probably need, this is good and we can, my wife's out of town and I have no life anyway, so I'm happy to continue doing this, but we probably at the January 3rd meeting, we probably ought to kind of start thinking about how do we want to, which one do we want to use, or how do we tweak it, as George said, do we take one and say, okay, for two, straight single family, 2 acres, or maybe a straight single family with a access, so above the garage, second floor, you're not increasing a footprint, you're not adding another house or whatever. Do we stick with the ordinance as it says, but if you want to get a standalone unit or a third unit in there, you add 2 acres, how do you, what do we want to do? That's, I guess those thoughts would be
What if-
useful.
What if we don't vote, or if the vote doesn't go through, in July, we're going to have to follow it?
The code officer will follow the state law.
And that is number 2?
Two, correct.
Okay, so.
2 just says, put it into the ordinance,
Yeah.
so that the ordinance is consistent with the
Right.
state law.
But also, we aren't fully sure what the state is gonna say.
Well, the law is what it
I mean-
says. The question will be, will rules promulgated by the DECD be adopted by this legislature that will then narrow those? So, for example, they might say to you, can't limit the size of a unit, those sorts of things. But the legislature, I think, would have to approve that if it's gonna have the force of law.
What if we, and just thinking about this, if we just have 2 options, the comp plan and number 2, which is that what we were talking
Let's do
about
it,
just
yeah.
now? Okay, sorry.
So,
I
Do we need to have,
differently.
do we need to put this off until January, or can we make that decision tonight? I can.
What, the consensus?
I think it's more clear, it'd be easier to understand, and we can talk more about it.
Now, when you say if we have 2 options, you mean the 2 options would go on the,
Or no, right now,
Warrant?
no, right.
oh, we
Yes,
just narrow it
I think
down?
that is
We're
what you're
narrowing
saying,
it
though.
down.
Okay.
But no, are
Or-
you saying put it
Yeah,
before the
we
select
could
board
do-
as that?
Like you said, the
I
comp
know.
plan first,
Yep.
and then, yeah,
Yes.
we could do that, but also I was thinking we could have another public hearing and with 2 options, see where people land there.
Then,
Just
yeah,
to
and
get a
again,
gut.
if the overwhelming input at the public hearing is, increase lot sizes, then you could reconsider that.
Public meeting is,
Either way.
I would just call it a public information, kind
That's-
of
yeah.
what we did last time.
But this is where you came out.
Okay.
Less formal and all that other stuff.
So, yeah, okay.
We could do ranked choice voting.
That's kind of what Kevin was recommending last night, was almost ranked, you don't like this, and then here's the other pieces, which would probably work. Okay, so I'm not sure where we are then. Do we want to,
Okay, yeah, before we would make a decision, well, we could make a decision, then present it to the public.
Or you could also report back to the select board, here's what we're thinking, before you go out to that.
I like that. Kind of getting their buy-in too.
You'll be there next Tuesday night, right?
I'll be there if what I'm here,
Do you want
whatever.
to get consensus from us?
Yeah, I want to, I'm happy to go in there and say, the other 4 don't know their butts from a hole in the ground, but, I'm only kidding.
Well, my consensus is going with option 1 with a fallback to, if that doesn't pass, then having the option of having another article that would go with the state requirements.
Just say, okay,
Put it into our ordinance so that we've got that.
Yes.
Rather than have code officer and people
Right.
are confused. Well, wait a minute, state law says this says this, what do I do?
We have the option to control what goes on in Durham, let's do that versus state telling us what we have to do.
Yeah, I would like to think that the state would say, okay, Durham, you obviously thought through this, and you've got a good plan, and we're not gonna, micromanage it, but good luck with that, maybe.
And it really what it would come down to is someone wanted to challenge that, they'd have to take it to court. And then the question would be, would somebody, number one, think it's worth it to go, like, I'm limited to a 800 square foot apartment, and I'm gonna take that to court to allow two 1,500 on a single family, not be limited by the accessory apartment. So, that,
Now, if someone, like right now, could I say, is there limits on how big a duplex units can be?
no.
So theoretically, I could, if I met setbacks and stuff, I could double the size of my house right now and turn it into a duplex.
Oh, and the other thing is that under Durham's ordinance on accessory apartments, if they meet the limitations of 50% of the main floor area,
Oh, it's
the
all
code
right.
officer can approve it. But if it exceeds it, they can apply to the planning board for conditional use approval.
Oh, so you could have an accessory apartment that was like 60% the size. if
Yeah,
you get-
yeah.
We approve it.
And sometimes that may make sense. Like, I put an accessory apartment in my house in Falmouth, okay?
Yeah.
And they changed the zoning to do what we're talking about. And the downstairs is a daylight finished basement. It's actually a split. And it was 1,200 square feet. And their 50% would make it required to be 800 square feet.
Okay.
So I was trying to figure out, how can I cut out 400 feet of floor area, add it to the garage, make it a store? And it's 400 square feet.
Yeah.
So,
you're
and you
not
go
making
by
the
there,
footprint
you
of
wouldn't
the-
know it driving by. It looks
Yeah.
like, it looks just like a single family.
Yeah, you're not making the footprint any
And that's
bigger.
kind of the idea of what this is trying to accomplish.
There was a really interesting comment, guy that was, I wouldn't say he was brought to tears, but at the election, who has, if I remember the count right, like 20 acres up front, 30 acres in the back. And our backlot rules, private road, $80,000-$100,000 to build the road, his son, he can't afford to bring his son back.
Right.
Option two would let him build a house on his 20 acres for his son, without going through all the other, back road issues or any of
Yeah,
that.
because you'd have two separate units.
He'd have two
Oh,
separate units, which,
size units.
I mean, there weren't a lot of people saying that, but there were a lot of people who were very interested in the accessory unit, apartment, grandfather's flat above the garage, whatever it may be, so.
Yeah, well, and we already allow that, but what I find kind of intriguing is you could have that, and you could also add like a tiny house and not, overwhelm your site, let's say. But right now, you'd have to get conditional approval or something to be able to also add a tiny
Yeah,
house.
tiny house.
You'd have to create a separate lot, actually. Although the code officer has gone by the town attorney to say they have to be allowed to put them on as accessory units.
They,
Because of
I
the
thought
use.
they had to approve tiny
Because
houses.
there's a separate law that was approved last year or the year before.
Oh, yeah.
It says you have to allow tiny homes as accessory units, but they can only be 400 square feet.
Which is kind of what a tiny house is.
Well, that's tiny.
That's
That's
a tiny,
micro.
tiny house.
Micro house.
Yeah.
Yeah, about 800 or so. Well, okay, so I know what I'm gonna sell on Tuesday.
Do you?
Your house?
That's what I'm gonna ask. Don't tell me. No, so number two, I understand. I get that, the option two. So number one, we're talking about two accessory units and on what size lot?
So basically, you would keep the 2 acre minimum lot size. You would allow on that either a single family with 2 accessory units or a duplex with 1 accessory unit on 2 acres.
And accessory units are not a
50%,
separate standalone
50%.
house.
They can either be part of the house or they can be in an outbuilding.
So it could be either one, and it couldn't be more than 50%.
And it could be
of
both. No, Well, again, technically, under the ordinance, if you go to the planning board, you could get approved under conditional use to be larger.
We would apply the same standards that are now in the ordinance.
Yep,
It's, so, two I get, that's just follow the state law.
yep,
Number one is,
follow the comprehensive plan.
follow the comprehensive plan would be the starting point, would allow up to 2 accessory units, and one could be an apartment, 2 could be apartment above this, the second floor in a garage, or it could be an apartment in a standalone house, and we would use the same criteria, no more than 50% of the, basically the same criteria, was more than 50%, you had to go to the planning board, I guess.
Yep.
Correct, is that?
Conditional use.
And so what's the plan with those 2 options? Those are our options that we're bringing forward to the public?
Yeah, I would just say, this is what we are thinking about taking forward to the public. We just, it's out there, we'd like your feedback now. And what I've been saying all along is, if you guys are just gonna tell me it's dead on the water, we'll not do that, because at the end of the day, they write the, we can make them, they can write the article, thank you.
Are we going with 1 and 2 purely based on the comprehensive plan? Because it seems like 2 and 3 would be the logical ones to pitch based on our survey, if the data means anything.
I know, I keep referring back to the comprehensive plan because with going to public presentations, people are saying, well, why aren't we following the comprehensive plan?
That, and if there isn't like a clear divide in our survey responses, then it seems
It is,
like the
yeah.
comp plan is a good backup.
Well,
right?
then what I heard last night in several other meetings is that, which I don't agree with, but that the comprehensive plan is a Bible. You must follow.
It is not.
Oh, it's
I
not.
agree with
It is
you.
not,
The
but
ordinance
I
is.
agree
it's a
with all of
tool. That
you.
lady said it
Right.
right, it's a tool, right?
It's a
And
tool.
it's a
It's a
tool
guide.
that we spent a lot of time on.
Exactly.
And we did a lot of surveys and,
But there are those who would say it is, you must follow.
yeah, and they're,
Legally, if you're challenged, it's gonna be we're talking preaching to the choir
Yeah,
here, right?
no, I agree, but I'm just saying that makes one, you just say this, we're following and I agree, I think there's a lot of work went into the comprehensive plan before my time, but I've been on a couple of boards that did them, and it's really, I thought, pretty good. It was clearly you all did a great job 5, 6 years, whatever it is now, 4 years ago.
Do you think it was more work than a month of having a survey up and getting 200 random people to respond to it? Because I can't imagine that would be possible.
really? Are you being serious?
I'm being very sarcastic.
Well, I'm sure you had a whole bunch of, there were odd meetings and,
So what's option 3 in a nutshell?
It's most restrictive, so as you add more dwellings, you increase the lot requirement size.
It's right behind you, the bottom one. The third one on the right in the lower level, increase the lot sizes for the extra units.
So you'd still be fine if you didn't have wetlands on your 6 acres. Because it would be 2 acres per your other accessory buildings.
Interesting.
Okay,
so I think I got the guidance. I'll give you feedback in an email and say this is what they said, and then January 3rd. And I think
oh
I've
yeah,
got,
January 3rd, right?
January
Next meeting?
3rd is, I know a couple, 3 of you said we're good to go, so we can have a quorum, so,
Yeah.
and we'll see.
Hopefully the combination of Charlie.
Oh, January 4th, or did we say 3rd? I'm
It's the
sorry,
3rd, I
we
think.
changed it to the
It's a
3rd,
Wednesday,
Tuesday?
Did I give the wrong day? Is it
4th is a Wednesday,
It's gotta be the
January
4th.
4th? I'm sorry. Yes, January 4th.
okay,
And what's that? That's our next
Next
planning board?
meeting. That's our next regular meeting.
okay.
And then 4th.
And we also need to elect officers there, so. I'm just saying.
What officers are there
What's that?
besides chairman
And vice chair.
and vice chair? Okay.
So, okay, go ahead there, Devin, you can cut it off.
Thank you.